In 2007 and 2008, I had an amazing opportunity to design a campaign that would ultimately elect the President of the United States. It started with an email from an individual working inside the campaign, orchestrating the new media efforts in Chicago. Of course, I had to take the job. And in taking the job, I realized that this was going to be a really big moment. I was responsible for designing everything in front of the campaign, in front of the senator, behind the senator, everything online and offline. This was an incredibly big mission. One thing that was truly a paradigm shift in the 2008 election was the fact that we actually believed that we could raise the money for this campaign by the American people and not by the special interest. This was a pretty bold goal. It had never really been done before. But by asking individuals to donate, we knew that we could ultimately take a massive effect on the American political process. By putting the voice in the people's hands, by actually allowing people to say, this is the country that they wanted, we were able to completely shift the perspectives and change the way that our government was working. We used imagery from the past to communicate in ways that would directly communicate to the American people. By showing this imagery, it was almost as if we were speaking directly to the subconscious. By using pictorial images rather than literally having to say things like, this is historic, we could speak a little bit more visually. The campaign was hallmarked by a logo designed by Sol Sender and team in Chicago. The logo had all the ingredients of what would make an incredibly good logo mark. It told a very simple story. It was incredibly easy to draw. It was very memorable. It was also incredibly adaptable. It allowed people to choose the way that they wanted to express themselves. Without saying a single word, they were actually able to share their support for a candidate. This was something that completely shuttered the American people. It allowed anyone and everyone to express their support and to get other people on board in a campaign that was going to require a massive ground effort. It's probably not a surprise that logos, even in the political realm, would be successful. Logo marks are symbols that define a brand, a product, a service. These are simple symbols. They're around us everywhere, and ultimately they define us, our beliefs, our preferences, and our allegiances. I really knew this was going to be a pretty large, massive opportunity. And in American politics, we actually saw the hope for a new day. A lot of people, whether you agree or disagree with Obama's politics, I don't think that it really matters, because the moment in which he was elected changed the world. It allowed some small boy in Kenya to actually think or believe and hope that he could actually become the leader of a free world, to become a president, to become a politician, to look beyond the horizons. I think that was really a massive change. And for me, I was just honored to have the ability to have such a front row seat at something that was so incredibly important. After publishing a book on the campaign, I wanted to make sure that we showed everything that we did inside the campaign, everything from buses to buttons. I also wanted to highlight all of the work that we did, that other people did, in and around the election. People from all around the world poured their support through art, through design, through visual images for a president and a politician. This was kind of unheard of. But quickly, that hope for a new day slowly subsided, and the complexities of our government began getting in the way. For me, I wasn't racing off to DC in order to become a politician or enter in a game of tug-of-war, right? I wanted to do something that would solve more problems. I continuously wanted to find new ways and new things to actually change the world. Not necessarily Europe, but languages have defined our boundaries, our borders. It's what has allowed us to share a commonality, for us to understand each other. Languages have ultimately been what makes an English person English, a Swedish person Swedish, an American American. These divisions get even deeper when we start thinking about just individual words. We start thinking of left and right, conservative and liberal, Democrat and Republican. Sometimes I wonder, what was life like before all these words actually existed? What was it like when two tribes would stumble upon each other for the first time? Trying to communicate, using their native tongues, probably not getting very far. I imagine that at some point they pointed to an object. They began using body language, or maybe they actually started drawing in the sand, just to find a way to speak to that other person, to find that commonality. We've known for 20,000 years that humans have used the visual language to communicate. And over time, that language slowly morphed. It went from the pictorial form to an ideographic form. Those drawing representations would take a long time if you were trying to record a day's events. So slowly, the language began evolving and becoming a bit more ideographic. The ideographic characters have the semantic meaning baked right in. My favorite example is the Japanese kanji for the word tree. The interesting thing about the Japanese kanji for the term tree is that it somewhat resembles that pictorial image, right? And you can see that semantic meaning baked right in. So naturally, if you duplicate tree, you ultimately say forest. But ideographic language had its own problems. The ideographic language, constantly as new concepts arise, you would constantly see more and more characters that one would actually need to draw. This made it incredibly difficult to learn. It created a very, very high learning curve. This was somewhat problematic. Creating a high learning curve means that there were those that knew the language and those that didn't know the language. But humans, I found, are pretty tenacious to communicate. It's something that they naturally want to do. So as language and writing systems evolved, the writing systems actually began listening to each and every syllable of a particular word, right? All languages have a pattern, a set of sounds, and if you listen to the sounds, you can begin to actually communicate and write character by character. So you can begin to form one character for one sound rather than a whole set of characters for every concept in the world. But of course, in time, a lot of people needed to figure out ways to communicate through shortcut. So as it became incredibly easier to spell out a word, it became incredibly more difficult to write that word out. So using kanji, you could create a sort of shortcut. Then our third form of writing, the phonetic. Thanks to the Phoenicians, furthered by the Greeks, adopted by the Romans, and then pretty much all of us, we enter the third major form of writing where we untie the semantic meaning altogether from the word. So there's been four major innovations in writing: pictographic, ideographic, syllabic, and phonetic. But through this time, there's been a constant need for a language that actually transcends borders, that allows us to communicate quickly and concisely, that can allow us to learn the language in very little time. As globalization increases, we see our borders quickly become erased, and technology reveals the connectedness in all of us. I'm pretty sure that all of us realize that there's no way to interact with our phones without going back to the most fundamental form of communication, the pictorial form. The language that existed even before written language. The reason is you can communicate so much information in a dense space quickly and effectively. But there hasn't been a single source or repository of this language anywhere. I asked that question, why isn't there a single source for this language? If humans have used it for 20,000 years, why is there no place in which I can easily find these symbols, download them, and use them? I wasn't the first to ask this question or to realize the effects of a global visual language. Gert Arnst and Otto Neurath in the 1930s developed isotype. This was a great way to help kids learn a new language. But they took that one step further by using quantitative data and teaming that with the language. They actually began to become the very early pioneers of the infographic. And with World War II knocking at the door, they were able to communicate to a wide array of people on a continent who all spoke incredibly different languages. Another example is in 1972, the AIGA and the US Department of Transportation team up to design a set of symbols that would ease the woes of travelers coming into the US internationally. I think that the visual language simplifies the most basic element of being human. It allows us to communicate even when language isn't an option. One of the things that I realized was that we needed some single reference. If not a single reference, at least a repository, someplace online where we could grab these symbols and use them in everyday situations. It was the motivation for creating the Noun project. The Noun project is a collection of symbols and icons that we have put out into the world. We're helping create, share, and enhance the world's visual language. The project, in a short amount of time, has become a valued resource by architects, designers, even executives, just wanting to make better PowerPoint presentations. But that's not the only use. A lot of people are using it in foreign language learning applications or helping autistic children communicate with their parents. We realize this is a really big vision, a wide thing to create a universal visual language. And there's no way that that could actually happen without encouraging user uploads. And the way that Wikipedia has gathered such a large amount of knowledge by encouraging writers to contribute, the Noun project could act as the same vehicle for the world's visual language, or a repository collecting all of the symbols and icons that the world has known. The interesting thing about an open source language is that all of a sudden you get many different ways to communicate one individual concept. This opens it up for the reality that having a single repository would allow us to track use behavior. It would allow us to understand cognitively what people are using more often. We could determine global preferences and which icon is being used in which region more frequently. If you think about it, the other thing that we're able to do is track the change over time. This is a language that is constantly changing, constantly evolving. If you take, for example, the telephone, probably very few of our children or our children's children will ever know that the phone had another part to it other than the handset. Or imagine the light bulb, constantly shifting and changing forms. But if we have an idea, we often go straight to that classic Edison filament bulb, which is the quick way to say, I have an idea. Speaking of good ideas, we open this library up, and this collection is available completely free via Creative Commons by attribution. So the entire language is available free for people to download as long as they attribute the designers. This creates a great incentive for designers to continue to contribute to the collection. Furthermore, we also opened it up, just because attribution can sometimes be difficult, we opened it up to the public and said, hey, why don't you make these symbols available for purchase? By doing so, professionals can use it attribution-free. They don't have to contribute to the designer, but the designer actually gets a little bit of a royalty. We're also making it even easier by launching pro accounts, making it easier for individuals to support their designers. And we're opening up our API. It's currently in beta, and something that we're really excited about. Individuals can develop applications and dream up any application of the world's visual language. It's not really all fun and games, though. We recently teamed up with the UN to design a set of symbols for the humanitarian aid effort. The suite is completely distributed on the Noun project and available to everyone in the world completely free. I think if you're doing anything for profit or nonprofit, it's incredibly important to still do things for good. We also teamed up with the American Red Cross, and by doing so, we developed an amazing amount of symbols with people that were designers and not designers. They got together and just started sketching crude drawings that turned into symbols for ideas like Skillshare, food shortage, search and rescue. As our world slowly becomes more and more globally connected, I think it's incredibly important to realize that our language still separates us a lot. In the same way that we used visuals during the Obama campaign to visually communicate the hope for a new day, there's so many applications that we can see the visual language playing out around the world. Imagine this individual. Without a working knowledge of Arabic, there's absolutely no way you can understand what he's saying about Facebook. But luckily, the individuals around him are using a universal symbol that we can all understand, the universal symbol for peace. I'm not saying that the world's visual language should replace our language. I think this is a perfect supplement to our languages. If we're all having to share this world together, I think it's important to employ any tool that we have at our disposal to change the world. Thank you very much.